Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And here's my big clicker, thank you. So, before I start, as we are doing in all of the sessions, and on behalf of all the presenters in this session, I would like to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands that we meet, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present and future. I have the great honour of moderating the final of our 4 thematic plenaries this afternoon before we close, unfortunately, our wonderful International Data Week. The 4th theme that we are now about to address is covering empowering the global data community for impact, equity and inclusion. I would say a very important topic and area to focus on. And of course, as International Data Week, we have it very much in our forefront and our foremind. I have 4 wonderful speakers joining us this afternoon. You only see 3 of them, I'm afraid, sitting down. We have one online, which also is a part of inclusivity, of course, in being able to have one of our speakers join us from South Africa. So first I'm going to introduce the speakers. They will, and you'll see them here, they're all going to give 10-minute maximum introductory statements to set a little context from their perspective around this topic. And then we're going to have a panel discussion, which I will start, but I will be inviting you all to engage and ask your own questions, please. So we have these people in the hot seats. Yes. So please keep your questions for the individual speakers or for the panel towards the end. And so the majority of this particular session will be dedicated to panel discussions. So in alphabetical order of surname, we have Dr. Sandra Collins, who's the director of the University College Dublin Library from Ireland. And Sandra is a former mathematician, but now turned librarian. She was instrumental in setting up the Digital Repository of Ireland, was then the director of the National Library of Ireland, and is now in the University College Dublin. So she will bring her insights to the table. Second is, I hear someone online, but I don't know who it is. Professor Devika Madalli, who is the director of the Information Library Network from Inflibnet, India. And Devika has been involved in the Research Data Alliance, was a former TAB member of ours many years ago. So it's really wonderful and Devika is going to talk to us about what's happening in India. We have, as I said, online Dr. Nokuthula, Mchunu, who's the Director of International Grants and Partnerships Division at the National Research Foundation, South Africa. And we're very grateful to Nox for joining us so early in the morning online. And you'll see her when her presentation comes. And last but certainly not least, on this wonderful, is she there? Oh, we've superimposed her. Isn't that wonderful? Thank you, Trev, for... Hey, Nox, thanks for joining. Lovely to see you. I can't see you here, but they can see you behind me. And last but certainly not least is Rodrigo Roa, the Executive Director of the Data Observatory from Chile. Okay, so I now will ask you, except Sandra, who's going to open our proceedings, to take your seats down, because from the stage they can't see the slides and I don't want to give them a broken neck. So Sandra's going to start us off, and Trev, if you can go back into the wonderful note sharing mode so Sandra can see her next slides. Thank you so much. Sandra.
Thanks a million, Hilary. It's been such a super conference. I have enjoyed it so much, and I feel so honoured and privileged to have this opportunity to share a story with you. So my name is Sandra Collins, and I'm talking to you today in my capacity as chair of an Irish Governmental Advisory Committee on Women's Stories. So I wanted to begin with this image of St. Bridget's Day. It's a new public holiday introduced in Ireland in 2023. It wouldn't be very new. And it celebrates the pre-Christian festival of spring, as well as St. Bridget and women's creativity. And it's also the first Irish public holiday honouring a woman. And that gives me a good context to begin telling you the story of our work on women's representation and women's stories. So in March 24 last year, the Irish Minister for Culture established a new advisory committee, a policy advisory committee on women's stories, to examine how the diverse experiences and voices of women, particularly underrepresented and marginalised women, how they are represented within the national collections and collecting institutions. And it's well known that women are widely underrepresented in national collections. So a simple example that you can test in your own country. If you consider, for example, the art collections, it's typical that only 5 to 25%, where 25% would be in a more modern art collection, are items by women artists. So our committee then was tasked with how to improve this, and we worked for about 18 months, and we will present our recommendations to our minister next week when I get home from Australia. And although this initiative is rooted in Ireland and cultural collections and the inclusion and representation of women, I really believe the approach can be used more widely to improve impact, equity and inclusion, and that it aligns really well, and I think personally it was greatly influenced by the RDA community-based ethos. Ooh. Okay, so what I want to talk about is the approach we took. I'm not going to dwell on the individual recommendations because some of them are specific to Ireland, and I should share them with the Minister before I tell everybody here. But what I wanted to do was talk through the approach we took, because I think it's very reproducible and it worked really well for us. So, as chair, I started by encouraging open and frank discussions, which supported the sharing and the respectful acknowledgement of differing perspectives. So we started with members of our advisory committee coming with different views and different perspectives. So it was really important to put everything on the table and have this open but courteous discussion. The committee then decided to be open and transparent in communicating with the public about our work. And with our government department, we set up a website, and on that website we set out clearly what the advisory committee was doing, and we published all our minutes and records of our meetings openly and as soon as possible after any of the meetings. We also respectfully acknowledge the progress that has already been achieved, but the task of the committee was based on acknowledging that women are not yet represented equally. So we had to accept the problem before we could address it. We adopted an inclusive approach with particular care and attention to language. And I mean the sensitivity of the terms and the terminology that we developed and agreed to use. That was really fundamental to our engagement with marginalised and underrepresented groups, because the first barrier and the feeling of exclusion flows from poor language choices. We commissioned independent research to identify and review current international best practice models, and the finding of that is that there are not a lot of there's not a lot of exemplars to look at. If you're thinking of a women's museum or a dedicated presentation of women's stories in the context of your country, there are not a lot of best practice models. Then we carried out a really substantial task, which was an open online survey, open to everybody to contribute to, and then a targeted broad consultation programme where we identified organisations, advocacy groups, activist groups and so on to bring in diverse professional, advocacy, representative and community groups to the table. Sorry, I don't want to give away my answers before we get there. And then we had two specific things that the Minister asked us to address. And one was to consider a review of the national collections, and the other was to consider the establishment of a dedicated women's museum. And these were quite complex and challenging tasks, so we established two subgroups of the committee with external experts brought in, co-opted, in order to address that. Then, as we worked through over our 18 months, we developed recommendations and we made them as widely applicable as possible so that they can be adopted and used outside of the cultural sector, outside of the national collections. And something we thought was important is to have illustrative examples to show that this is possible and to show positive outcomes and positive impacts from the work where we had examples to share. So I'm going to show you now. These are our recommendations, just at a very high level. So there's, in fact, we ended with 31 recommendations under these 8 themes. And I don't have enough time to go through them all in detail, but I would be really delighted. I could talk about this forever. So please stop me and ask any questions. But what I thought I might do in this forum is to pick out 2 examples just to show you what I mean. So I'm going to give you now an example that illustrates our recommendations under themes 3 and 4, community-led and co-curatorial ethos, and a special focus on underrepresented and marginalised groups. So this is a photo from the project I'm about to tell you about. And this is an Irish Travellers project. So Irish Travellers are an Indigenous ethnic minority with an itinerant tradition, recognised in Ireland as an ethnic group with shared beliefs, values and language, and distinct from the settled population. And the project that this is an illustration of it's the Pishrog project, and it's an example of a community-led, co-curated approach. So it was conceived, shaped and led by Traveller community members. The principles, direction and the content were all determined by Travellers themselves. And throughout the process, co-curation ensured that the Travellers held authority over their own cultural heritage, their own records. And governance was structured to place Travellers as equal decision makers with the National Museum, and that is even down to the decision about what items would be added to the national collections. So this is an example of the work to deliver a community-led and co-curated project. The output then was exhibited with Travellers co-curating the narrative, the labels and the interpretation. Okay, the second example I want to show you is a folklore archive. And this is an example of how we can improve our national collections, our collections, to better represent women in them. So what is a folklore archive? There's some lovely illustrations, I hope you like it. So folklore archives are repositories which collect, preserve and make available expressions of traditional knowledge and oral cultural heritage across a wide range of formats and media, including, folklore archives are generally unofficial and informal, and they're generated through fieldwork like interviews, recordings, photography. And these are illustrations of the National Folklore Collection, which is inscribed on the UNESCO Memory of the World Register, and I have the privilege of caring for it in our library in Dublin. So this is the digital platform that we publish our digitised content on. Last year it had about 7 million visits from 172 countries. So when you make these, when you digitise and share these collections, people come to use them. They're a wonderful research resource. It includes a volunteer transcription of over 450,000 pages of manuscript material, all of which are now machine readable and searchable. And we make this investment and these choices with our National Folklore Collection because they are intrinsically very equal and equitable and very representative. And I guess I would finish by saying one of our recommendations is that in all the choices collecting institutions make, that you can consider representation in everything you do, in the cataloguing, in the exhibiting, in the digitisation, in your metadata, and that's really fundamental to equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And, oh wow, 1922. Yeah. Cool. 16th of July 20. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Knox. Let's see if we can see her online. I'm going to move her slides on, so you'll bear with the next slide, please, but that's what we have agreed is the easiest thing for us and in the room. Knox is going to talk about, there we go, talk about empowering, no, the title of your presentation is not that one, right, Knox? You can hear me, you can see me well. Can we hear you?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
Yeah.
Good.
Hey.
Okay. Knox, just because you need to know, there's a very kind person in the front here flashing cards at me for time. They're going to flash at me when you have 2 minutes left, and I'm going to have to interrupt you and say it because we have no other way of talking to each other. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. Very good. So over to you, Knox.
Yes, we can go on to the next slide, on the first slide. Thank you so much for allowing me to present online. It's one of those things that although there's community trying to be inclusive, but there are some processes that are not so inclusive, and one of them is visa processes. So I will start off with, of course, with as we all know that in the continent, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of data that has come out of the continent. But of course, in general, people have seen the continent as a data point, not actually the owners or the funders or the authors of whatever outputs or data output that comes out. So this year I picked up some few stats from a Kenyan publication that showed that 76% of research in the continent is led outside. So this begs a question on equity, inclusion, and what do we mean about equitable partnership. So I don't have an answer to this. I just want us, when we start talking about this processes, to think about holistically what do we mean when we get into these types of discussion. The next one is an illustration of this where data is used not very nicely. As we know, the on my left, I don't know how it's facing on the screen, is generally how the map is represented in the world. But if you look at it, the real size of Africa is about 20-30% larger than what is acceptably used all over the world. So as peoples and as a global community, we continue accepting data that is inaccurate that comes from the continent, and we refuse to correct such obviously blatant misrepresentation of such things. Again, it's just a thought to get everybody thinking about this. So we can go to the next slide. So for us now, of course, I used to be the Deputy Director of the African Open Science Platform. I think Tiamo is there participating in one of the sessions. We've been trying to do a lot of work with Code Data and other partners in the continent to work on this. Of course, there was a study done general on open science, which include data, to look at what are the barriers of inclusion and participation within the continent. Of course, sometimes we think that the digital divide is the first thing that's a problem, but it's actually not. Yes, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of incentive, the data literacy is a problem. But actually now we don't need to think of the continent, that we need to capacitate the people. The people know how to access this, so how do we do it? So at the NRF, I will show, just because of time, just a few examples examples on how we have been trying to be inclusive, especially within the continent, because we have a wide variety of partners that we work in different areas where we create and look after data that we want to be owners of that. We can go to the next slide. So one of these is what we call at the NRF, how do we leverage our partnership for the continent and with the continent. So as you know, and this is a nice conversation because this data week is happening in Australia, which we are partners in this. Half of the square kilometre array is in South Africa and the other part of it sits in Western Australia. So of course, this is a huge global multinational program that at the onset of it, mostly South Africa and other countries in Latin America, in Europe, and of course in Australia and in the Americas were part of the project, and none of the African countries were part of this project, which meant that the data that is required to grow astronomy in the continent, which is expensive to produce, will still leave a big hole in the continent. It will still expect the data that is produced outside of the continent to feed some of these countries. So if we go to the next slide, what South Africa then did, and the NRF hosts the SKA. If you look on my left side, the long list, this one we call is partners that have stars underneath. There's a beginning is Australia and of course South Africa, and we have large consortia of partners as a part of the SKO organization. But if you then look a little bit on the left, this is what we call African partners country. They may not financially contribute into the infrastructure, but they are part of the infrastructure and part of some of the decision making of the infrastructure, and this also allows access to their scientists to come and use the infrastructure and produce data so that the data production and ownership is equitably and inclusively owned within the continent. And this has seen growth in large amount in this area of astronomy and space science, and it was perfectly demonstrated last year when the General Assembly for Astronomy was hosted in South Africa, and we had such a good turnout on most of the space agencies in the continent. So this is where, when we think about what does equitable partnership means, what does it mean to have not, to the ones that have not, and where data makes a big difference in a particular area, how organization can think properly and how to be more inclusive and equitable. The next one I will go to is an example that also how do we leverage our existing partnership for a new initiative into again providing data that is required for a particular challenge in the continent. This happened during COVID. In the NRF, we lead an initiative that is just celebrated its 10 years. It's called the Science Granting Initiative for the Sub-Saharan Africa. Basically, what it does is that it strengthens governance of science and the establishment of science granting in the continent. Science granting is funders, is organization within the country that usually are government that will look after the science system. So of course the NRF has been well established, but many countries do not have this. They usually govern science from the ministries. So we have currently 17 countries that are part of these initiatives. However, we have, as you see there with many logos, a lot of developmental partners that have come into this program. So this program was there to strengthen science and of course make sure that science is inclusive. However, when COVID hit in 2020, most of these organizations, including our South African Department of Science and Innovation and of course the NRF, within 3 months, we're able to put together a large pot of fund to respond to COVID and to generate data and to generate information that was able to assist governments within the continent to respond to COVID. What we then did is that we then saw that most of this data, although it was published in many journals or many other research outputs, most of it was not sitting within a repository or within an infrastructure in the continent. Can I go to the next slide?
Yeah, and you have 2 minutes left, Knox.
Yes, I'm at the beginning. So we started, how could we develop with other partners, community type of practice that we could have access to this information. But however, we were then very careful on how do we communicate this and how can we take care of the linguistics. So if we go to our next slide quickly, we can jump to the next one. As you see, the repository that we chose currently does use some AI model that allows translation. Of course, I'm very biased when I did the screen grab. I am Zulu. So as you can see, you can get a rudimentary translation of most of the abstracts in many languages that are used in Africa if you go to this repository. And this is where we chose how to now, as the NRF, start collating all our output data from research that is produced by the National Research Foundation and its partner. And of course, the National Research Foundation, which I work for, is currently the biggest funder in the continent of public research. I think that is my last slide. If we go to the next one. Yeah, so of course, as the first and foremost, to keep in the mind, I am an African, and also, so whatever we bring in, whenever we go to our partners, you must always remember that, and we come with the spirit of Ubuntu, and for us, this is a basic thing that you are, I am because we are, so we are always working together. Thank you. I hope I didn't.
We cut off her sound. Oh, no. Thank you, Knox. I don't know, are you still with us? I can't, she's gone off my screen, but I hope she's still with us. Actually, that's lovely. You know, we in RDA, we use what we call, what is an African product. We say a proverb. We say, if you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. But you have some wonderful proverbs, African proverbs. Knox will stay with us and join us then, because we want to deep dive into some of those topics that she talked about. But now we'll go to another part of the Southern Hemisphere. Rodrigo, please join me on stage, and you give us your insights to the Data Observatory.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I move away.
Thank you, Hilary. Hello, everyone. Well, my name is Rodrigo Roa. I am the Executive Director of Data Observatory. Well, Data Observatory is a public-private academia institution that was created by the government of Chile with the participation of AWS and Adolfo Ibáñez University. The thing that the government at that time think it was very important is to take care about data, raw data in our case, regarding mostly to astronomy. As Knox says, and Australia also have enormous capabilities of astronomy observation. Chile holds several institutions like ALMA telescopes that can watch to the skies and open skies, and holds like 80% of all Earth astronomy observations. So that was the first idea, but it took like 1 year to develop this project, and then we opened the scope and started to building and working on climate data, on society, in natural resources, and of course in Earth observation and regarding satellite images. The idea of Data Observatory by itself is to be a bridge between knowledge and decision making. So we curate data, we acquire data, we search, but we develop platforms in order to make available for researchers, for policymakers to have decision-making things to do based on evidence. So in summary, through large-scale data management, we promote evidence-based public policy and we try to develop technology, science, and innovation with our regional identity, and we try to improve or implement strategic decision-making to address the challenges faced by Chile and Latin America. This is our strategic pillars: data, solutions, engagement, and talent. And this is how we transform raw data into actionable intelligence, building solutions, and we connect stakeholders and develop talent. This is part of our research and work areas. As I told before, we are having nowadays, since 2022, more than 20 projects in these different areas. 2 in astronomy, in Earth observation, several other projects, like 3 of them, natural resources, for instance, the health of the oceans, topics regarding functional traits about native species, and so on. And in society related, we only manage open data, statistical data, and the purpose of make it available for decision makers. One of the things that we noticed in the past years working with data, working with researchers, is that there wasn't a big knowledge about what is fair, what fair principles are. So we discovered that there are several gaps in how students, undergraduate students, PhDs, and postdoctorals were managing their research. And in public institutions, it's happened the same thing with data. They don't know how to standardize their data, classify their data, and how to build their platforms. So as we saw this, we created with several other Chilean institutions, mostly universities, this strategy. And the idea is to implement a fair policy in Chile that goes directly to science, for research, and of course, it could be useful for public data and for private information regarding industry. So that work took about 12 months to be built, and it was launched this year in March. And the next step is to build an institution that is supposed to hold and teach and make it executable, or aims to implement those FAIR principles in different aspects. So we decided to create this Surdata Alliance, meaning Southern Data Alliance, in order to promote these FAIR principles, first in Chile, but every country in South America, it's open to be a part of it. It's not an actual agreement. It's just the idea of building a community that wants to learn and be aligned with RDAs, for instance, and co-data directions to make it more optimizable and interoperable data. But the thing is that in Latin America, we are struggling with several issues. One of them is that there is a lot of data around, astronomy, as I said, ocean, population, census, so on, and there's a little availability and access to them. So that's what I said, that Surdata is part of the solution, I guess, and this is what at Data Observatory we think, that we're building bridges of knowledgement in order to make these principles in practice. And we say that these principles are not buzzwords. The idea is to democratize and make the data available for everyone. And we need to teach FAIR to people from the basics in schools, in universities, so everyone can apply them as we think at the ISO norms are mandatory. I think FAIR could be, in that case, very useful for the treatment of data in general. Another milestone, or maybe it's not even launched, but I must say that it's a good example of empowerment of the region, is this project called LATAM GPT. Actually, LATAM GPT, it's the first Latin American language model trained with 2.6 million documents from 21 countries in South America. And it's supported from more than 30 institutions and more than 60 experts. The good thing about LATAM GPT is that it's an open model and it uses open database. So if you're interested, you can launch when you can launch the webpage when in December, maybe on January, and you can access the data that it's been used to train and to give the pre-training training of the model. So the idea and the conclusion of this project is that Latin America is not just consuming technology, it's creating. We always say that all the trends, and I speak to some of you these days, that we're used to get trends, we're used to get movies, we're used to get, I don't know, books. But in this case, Latin America is proving that its own culture can be processed, can be trained, and can be recognized among others. And it's not an industry-focused kind of model. It's more a national or global model to prove the world that we can do it. So I think this is my last slide, but we need to stay focused on what we are doing. We are, I think, 3 years behind of what happened in the Northern Hemisphere. So, but it's a good momentum to start not building a new wheel. We need to use what you guys have already developed. So the idea is to connect, to collaborate in order to use and promote open data. And we think that open data, it's needed to be standardized because data is essential for everyone. And collaboration wins at the time. There is an Latin American index of AI that was launched 2 weeks ago and says that Chile and Brazil are leading the race of developing AI and using AI, but the rest of the countries are trying to bring more enthusiasm, and they're pushing efforts in order to found and promote new initiatives. So the lemma now is to act now, and the region has a lot of talent and diversity, and what it lacks in urgency and coordination. Then we need institutions like Data Observatory with the help of you guys, RDA, CoData, World Data Systems, ARDC, to bring us help in order to validate what we are doing now, and with the hope that we can be part of the world and part of the identity, of course, being recognized for everyone. And that's it. So much. Thank you for everyone.
Gracias, as they say. Thank you so much, Rodrigo. I was very fortunate to visit Latin America. I spent almost 6 weeks there last year, 9 countries, including Chile. And I saw the Data Observatory and many other things. Wonderful, a load of activities going on there. So, right, our next and last context. Where are you, Devika? Do come. Devika is going to give us the insight on, I like this title, India's One Nation, One Subscription. So over to you, Devika. Here's your big green button.
Okay. Good evening, greetings from me. And when Hilary contacted me, thank you for contacting me. I was just thinking, what's the most exciting thing that happened in academics and research in India? And it is the One Nation, One Subscription. So I thought I might as well talk about this to an international audience, and that's why I'm here. I am director of what's called as InflibNet. InflibNet is a mouthful, I know. It's the Information and Library Network of India. We work under the University Grants Commission of India, and we network, as we speak, 985 universities in India, not a big number. The One Nation, One Subscription was envisaged as a key step towards our national goals of enhancing access to knowledge resources. What happened, to tell a little story about this consortium, in India there were about, there were many, but there were 10 big ones, which were domain-based consortia for subscription, and some were also resource-based, the type of resource-based, and some were generalistic. And that the one that you see on top, the Isho the Sindhu, was the consortium that was headed by my organization, which is InflibNet, under the Ministry of Education. And when we did a study of all these 10 consortia, we realized that there were many overlaps of this, and there were variable price given to each of the consortium. So this is where the thinking of ONOS started. So because these were 10 consortium, the thinking at that time, I was not part of this organization. The discussion started way back in maybe 21, 22, way back then. And then trying to bring 10 consortia, let me go back to that, together, which were so disparate in their content and in their policy was not so easy. That's exactly why it took such a long time. The other was the publishers. The publishers were not so willing to come under one umbrella, and they gave us as many problems as they could think of, and it took well over 3 years to sort of bring all this under some kind of a semblance. So in the end, we had about 36 publishers come to the table, to the negotiation table, and then six of them were did not agree to the terms and conditions, because we did try, because there was no other way to try this. We tried one size fits all here, because in a country as disparate as India, with the users of 10 consortium across the country, across disciplines, it was very difficult. And the 6 publishers did not agree, and the 30 that agreed with them is what we formed the One Nation, One Subscription. This covers about 13,000 journal titles under 27 broad categories, and the international publishers include all the top, the biggest ones. The terms and conditions were many, but one of the things that we told the publishers is that the array of titles that they have when they sign this contract is what they have to promise the consortium. And this is for we signed the contract for 3 years, 2025, 26, and 27. And the outlay for this is, what is this? Oh, I messed up. So the outlay for this is about 6,000 crores in Indian rupees, and that converts to about 25 million USD for a 3-year period. So that is, there are many stories to this consortium. It is good that we could get it off the ground. It is not the most ideal, maybe, because we have had bouquets and brickbats since we implemented it. This was announced by the Government of India on 25th of last year, 25th of November last year, and in the announcement itself, my organization, InflibNet, was named as the implementation agency. And as though we had a magic wand, we had to do this on 1st January of 2025. And that was the period of time we were given to actually implement it. But then we struggled, and as we speak, we have 6,500 institutes already networked under this One Nation, One Subscription, and they are making use of the resources that were. So that is one part of the story, but the committee which sat down for ONOS is also charged with the other 2 things: to bring up the visibility and access and impact of Indian journals and repositories. That is what we will be looking at in the next phase, immediately after the implementation of ONOS. And then also having new research evaluation methods, which will make dependence on the high impact factor, high price journals lesser. So these are also lined up. It's not as though we are going to stop with the subscription model. So I have to go 2 slides back now because I messed up. The question is, what beyond ONOS? So what about, we are also looking at what about democratization of knowledge? Is subscription to content the only way to access knowledge? I know that these are the questions already in your minds. If you ask me all the clever questions now after the talk, maybe I will tell you some side stories. And what about the content by Indian authors and researchers? We do not know where it is. We have not done something like paper pledge right now. So these are all the questions. I did write up that bit to Nature. So as an answer to those questions that linger, that is subscription the only mode of access, we are also in a little beyond concept level of what we call as the Bharat Open Science Platform. Bharat is the indigenous name of India for India. Okay. And the thought is to create a Diamond OA platform for hosting Indian content, also including paper pledge, also including a module for publication integrity oversight, and running the open content metrics, which I have been advocating for a long time to push the impact of open content itself. So these are also on the anvil. So that was in short my presentation, and I'll be very, very happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Devika. And I invite you to stay on stage, grab a microphone there, and Sandra and Rodrigo are going to join me. And I don't know, is Knox still with us? Trevor, what magic are you going to... I can't see her here, but I'm sure you can.
No, I'm here.
Hello. I can hear you, but I can't see you. Hang on. Okay. So, I think you probably agree 4 very different examples from obviously four different geographical, cultural contexts, but all go to illustrate that while we're all here as big believers, I would hope, in global open science, that there's still a bit of a way to go. So I wanted to talk a little. Knox, you mentioned it, so maybe there you are. Hi. You mentioned it in your presentation about multilingualism. Yes, so we're all here speaking my language, which is English. But what about the whole challenge around what have you done? And we'll start with you, Knox, and I'll move to the other panelists. In addition, you gave us one example, but other things about to reduce these linguistic barriers, where in the African continent you have quite a number of languages.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I will maybe to answer that question, put on a thread on what Devika has just finished talking about the diamond type of publishing. So last year, South Africa hosted the summit of the Diamond Open Access. For the first time, probably in the world, we were simultaneously translating in Portuguese, Spanish, and in Swahili. Which we've been trying to push to do this. So, and also as you saw that in the platforms that we are trying to use with the repositories, we are trying to make sure that, of course, we use some translation. And I must admit that, of course, we are using large language models, which are not so accurate. But my argument in this, and I've made it to our organization, is that I do not speak French, Portuguese, or any other type of language. But if AI can be 90% correct, I'll probably figure out what is being said until we get to a perfect one. So I think this is where technology becomes, as Rodrigo has talked about, becomes vitally important. So we need to figure out, I think the biggest thing in metadata, in publishing, is using the current technology into addressing inequities and making sure we're inclusive.
Thanks, Knox. I'll move to you, Rodrigo. You're closest to me. What about
same question?
In Chile? Yeah, same. We'll keep this one for the moment.
Yeah, I think Knox is right. Technology help you to process different languages, and the way that I think is that you can be inclusive, incorporating and using or training these models in the big scope of variety that we have in our region. We speak Spanish, Portuguese, some English, but not every country speaks the same. And I don't know if we had this conversation, but I explained some of you over here that we Chileans, we speak Chilean, we don't speak Spanish. So the best way to train models and to get interaction between different cultures is to use technology in order to be as inclusive as we can. So I think it's very important to take that knowledge of the reality, different languages, different ways to speak, and to train models and to use technology in that matter.
Technology for good. Devika?
Yeah, hello. We only have 22 languages in So luckily, English is the one which we use for business mostly, and so hence the higher education was mostly done in English. But having said that, increasingly there is awareness and there are resources in the 22 languages now. So there are emerging issues of sharing those Indian language resources among the communities. There are two tools from the Government of India supported things. One is called Anuvadini, stands for translator, and the other one is Bhashini, stands for language, the goddess of language. So these two tools are, of course, using LLM models to translate, and as we train, they're getting better and better. So that is the situation. But that's just technology. On the language side, there's more than technology. For example, ONOS, we were chest thumping that we did a great job and did 7,000 institutes or 6,500. And about 5,000 of them asked the content in their own language. This is international content and it is in English. And we tried, there came the questions about policies, how we really negotiate to get the content in Indian. So that angle is also to be deliberated and implemented.
Do you want the word again?
Yeah.
Microphone.
I want to add something.
Okay.
Can I
Very quickly, and then we give Sandra.
No, Sandra, then you go first.
And then we go back to Rodrigo.
No, the thing is that we used to, there are two things I want to talk, yes. One of all models are trained in English, and in Spanish, I might say, not your 22 languages, but in Spanish, there are more than 600 million Spanish speakers. So you need to train in more languages. That's the first thing I want to say. And the second, I forgot, so Sandra.
Hilary, I was thinking of something that I really liked and was really impressed by is using the global community of the RDA to bring the languages together. So the 23 things for libraries, so that learning resource for research data management, and putting that into the community and then the community adapting and translating it. How many languages did it? I think it was
something
20,
like 15 or quite a number, all done by the community themselves.
Yeah, and I think there's something, a sense of ownership and a shared resource, and that building on something that's openly published and encouraging that is a good way to deal with languages.
Yeah, I think I found that we're running these series of webinars, in Latin America at the moment, and I found that when I went there last year that, you really have to break down the linguistic barrier, because and my understanding of your continent was that they're not unable to work in the English language, but of course it's much more openly and welcoming if we could assist them in, especially with the technical aspects, right? So it's one thing to talk about the different open science practices, but then there are technical aspects that they need to be nuanced in their own in a person's own language. Did you remember what you wanted to say? Because you're looking at me like that.
Yes, and now I remember. I'm sorry. This is the final day, so we need to be more relaxed.
Yeah.
No, another thing is very important. We have gaps of technology. And if you want to be inclusive and if you want to empower the communities, you need to build infrastructure that gets to everyone. And that means you need to work or build acknowledgement, doing workshops, doing activities in order to make these ideas more useful for everyone. As I said, data for good.
I said that. Did you say that?
You said it. Yes, yes, yes. I want to take credit for that. Sorry.
You don't get away with much with me, you know that. Okay, so I'm going to move on because linguistics are one part, but there are many different barriers. What about, we always hear about responsible data sharing, right, and ethics, the ethics, which is becoming more and more important, particularly when we talk about the technology component. So, Sandra, what about, you know, do you want to give any insights on, and perhaps in the context in which you gave us the example, or in another around the ethics and
Yeah, so we did a piece of work in UCD Library around ethical cataloguing. So this is the creation of metadata with ethical guidelines, and so it aligns well with the fair and care principles. You know, people would be familiar with the ideas. And then that is really useful in cultural heritage collections because they can have material that can have metadata or content that's discriminatory or derogatory created at a time, and we reinterpret it now. So there's an element of being careful with our metadata creation now and going forward, and that reflects the what our ethical views are today, and an additional task to look back on material that has already been catalogued and discoverable, and to re-examine the metadata there, and to think of things like, was it derogatory or discriminatory language that wouldn't be acceptable and appropriate now, maybe medical content or even human remains, aspects of colonialization, like there's many different things, and taking the time and the care to revisit them makes a researcher's experience of finding and accessing the material, you know, much more contextualized. In the example I was talking about, which is women's representation, what I would often say is the women are there, they're in your collections, you just didn't include them in the catalogue and you didn't acknowledge them, and that's why we can't see them now. So that aspect, really fundamental, you know, way to restore the presence and the acknowledgement of what is in these really vital research resources.
Nox, are you okay there? Do you want to chip in on this one?
Yeah,
Responsible.
I'm still here. Yeah, I'm still here. I just wanted on the last point before I come to this, I had my hand up. I know it's very difficult to manage two rooms, which is the online is another room. Was that I think with the linguistic and the language part, we are now feeling even more the historical colonial past, because to do training, as Rodrigo is talking about, you need a subset of data that is available also to train the models. But what we've seen with people in Africa and in South Africa trying now to train models with African languages is that those subsets are not available properly in the internet to train the models so that the models are correct. So we really have to go back to try, especially in places where you have a vast diversity of languages like in the continent. So there are a few projects that are trying to generate language data that is correct, then that data can be used to train models. So it's really starting to go back. Because as an example, if you look the availability of data of an English language, in African languages, most of them is just 0.00001%. And you can't train models with such things. So these are just the inequities that even if the technology exists, it makes it very difficult to train the models correctly. Yeah, and now I ran away with the train quite a bit. Let me stop there and let other people speak and collect my thoughts on this current question.
No worries. We'll all come back to you. And I'm going to ask one more question after I get a few more answers for this one, and then I'm going to open the questions to the floor. Right. Devika, do you want to? No. We're going to move on to your next one. Devika, did you want to talk about ethics? Oh, him? You don't either?
You asked me if I want to talk about ethics.
Yeah. Do you want to talk?
Well, yes, of course. I can be hours talking, you know.
I think I know that.
Well, actually, I'm an anti-bias ambassador. I'm a lawyer by trainee, so my areas of practice are compliance, ethics, data governance, and this is why I am interested. So ethics nowadays, and always maybe, it's been a tricky way to see it, because maybe you can use, or you can have like religious concepts about what is ethical or not. It doesn't matter which religion you are, or if you have acknowledgement of some ideas, you may think something is ethical. So who or whom is setting the standards about the ethics? And nowadays, with all these emerging technologies and social media, of course, the question goes highly fast for everyone. So there are a lot of apps that it seems very fast or seemingly easy for everyone to know that that's not ethical. But sometimes the red line between what's ethical or not, it could be very invisible. So I think that governments, national organizations, international organizations, need to set some standards about that, and to incorporate ideas of inclusiveness, of respect. And I think respect is the most important part of ethics.
Microphone.
Oh. They turn me off.
Yeah, that's AI, you know. When you talk for too long, it turns itself off. AI for good.
Thank you, Hilary.
Got a few of my seconds.
I want to keep them lively there while they're thinking of their questions.
So now that Rodrigo talked, I just have to, that brings to my mind that I was the chair of the ethics of use of biological data of some type, and we went into a very, very long discussion then. And then in the end, the only solution that we thought was to maintain transparency and not just pronounce that we are compliant with ethical policies, the law, just be transparent. That's what we recommend.
Okay. Knox, I think you can see me, but you can't, because you can see them. Did you want to intervene again? I'm going to open the floor, because I have a feeling that the people in the audience are itching to ask questions. And now Rodrigo's got the microphone back, so quick. If you have a comment, make it now, before... You're okay there, Knox? Did you want to mention it?
Okay.
You're okay?
Yeah.
I'll come back to you then after for the next one. Okay, so who would like to ask a question? Or I can keep asking, but I think it would be nice to hear from you. Oh, you're all very shy and quiet this afternoon. There, we have a lady in the front. Do we have a microphone? Or
I have one.
Oh, yeah, and we know. So, it's okay, you can have it back. I would ask you, please, kindly, for the benefit of the people online, to introduce yourself, state here quickly your name, where you're from, and then ask your question. Thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Diana Roch, and I'm from Barcelona. So I have maybe a question for you, Rodrigo. I was wondering if you have plans, if you have planned to propose small language models for indigenous languages, because you mentioned the multiple Spanish variants, but of course, also in Chile, you have many indigenous languages, between 7 and 11, if I'm not mistaken. And in Brazil, they have 180 indigenous languages, in Mexico, 68. So what's your plan? Because I think that you have a very nice case, Chile, because of the size of these indigenous languages, and maybe you could propose something along these lines. And the second part of my question is, beyond doing that, how you are going to propose this in a way that it's respectful and we are not reinforcing the colonial practices we want to fight against. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana. It's very good question, both of them. I will answer in Spanish. Yes, thank you, fan club. We already been training this Latam GPT model with several indigenous languages, such as in Chile. What happened? Merced, you want me to speak in Spanish then? Lo puedo hacer.
In Chilean Spanish.
Ooh, are you sure? Now, the thing is that we are training the model with different indigenous languages. Not only in Chile, we are incorporating the language from Isla de Pascua, it's Eastern Island. The other one, it's Mapudungun, okay? And so others, but as Nox said, no, you said, Devika, that there's, and Nox also, there's difficulty to access to data for original indigenous people. In other countries in South America, they're doing the same. They are providing us some books, texts, newspapers, and we're processing them in order to recognize those languages. So I don't know if I answer your first question completely. Yeah, sort of. Okay, but we're aiming to do it. But the first launch is going to be on December. The idea is to incorporate more indigenous languages. Hilary, don't look at me with your eyes like that. And the second question was, I think I can answer that with national sovereignty, like we need to have an identity. And I think that the way that we can approach to that problem, not to be users of technology, is developing the tools that we are doing it right now. So the idea for all the community or the regional for South America is to use this Latam GPT tool in order to create user cases, new tools, and bring it into the higher level. It's not a basic model. Actually, it started running at Llama 3.1. So, and it's being trained with, I think it's, Alvaro, you can correct me, but 7 billion tokens in this language. Yes. So it's parameters. Yeah. So it's a big and important adventure, I might say, at this time.
Gracias. Who would like to ask a question? Oh, Ingvill. There. Can we pass the microphone to Ingvill? Oh, there you go.
Hello. It's on. So hi, I'm Ingvill Constance Odegaard from the University of Oslo in Norway. So thank you all for very interesting inputs. I would like to get back to the language issue again, because what I was thinking about is, of course, it's very inclusive that you have technical possibilities to do the translations, but I was also thinking about so at least you get access to a lot of information, but I was also thinking about how do we mitigate the challenge of interpreting information without the gender and cultural context-specific meanings. Because we do know that we have gendered aspects, but we also have this direct and indirect communication and way of saying things, that what we do a lot of studies in intercultural communication. So this challenge of, at the one hand, making everything kind of open and accessible to a wider audience, but at the same time being responsible in the sense that we make sure that it's interpreted in the correct way. So if you have any suggestion on that, I'd be happy to hear.
Who'd like to take? Would you like to?
I think this is really important. So, and this is not multilingual, but the work that we were doing around women's representation, and just all the feedback and the discussions with people that were contributing, it's the cultural and the sensitivity of the language is so important, and it can if you get it wrong, it's so it really is detrimental. It excludes and it totally undermines what you're trying to do. And I can't. I don't know. I can't imagine machines doing this, being able to reach that level of nuance and sensitivity that people have. But anyway, people smarter than me will explain why I'm wrong. But that's just, I guess, from experience of that, the time and the labour and the thought that it requires to get that subtlety and nuance and sensitivity right. And the other point I was thinking as we were talking is, so often it is the underrepresented, marginalised or minority languages or whatever it is that have to do all the work, right? And we've a huge research community here, we've a global community here, and I think I feel it's incumbent on us all to contribute to that it is not just the beneficiaries of being included that have to do all the work to do the inclusion.
Somebody else had their hand up before, and now they put it. Is it down? Over. It was that area. No. Okay.
Maybe I don't know if my mic is on.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Knox. We hear you.
Yeah. I mean, this is the last question is really. It's a very hard question. I think it goes back to what my other comment is, that it is almost feels like the technology or every development picks on an old scab, because previously these languages were excluded. So because certain languages, maybe English, French, and Portuguese and Spanish, these nuances of the language are already there because the language has grown in digital form with the technology for a long time. While the small spoken languages did not grow because they were just continuously being repressed. And then now we are trying to do everything at once with one technology, while these other languages took a while to get into technology, into digital technology, and then the large now the technology can pick up these nuances a little bit better because they have so much data to train. I struggle again with the two things. Do we want to maybe ask the technology to be as accurate as a person will be, which again Sandra I think touched on. This is maybe impossible to do, but can we get to a step where we get something to use so everybody, you can try to preserve the language and then build from there as the technology progress. And hopefully, as the first question comes, working with native and indigenous speakers of that particular language to grow and accurately get to a space where it's acceptable by that community. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. We can't see here. Big shining lights in our eyes, so it's very hard to see who. Somebody's pointing at somebody.
I have a question.
Oh,
Is that
hi.
okay? Hi, my name's Owen Forbes. I'm from the CSIRO in Canberra here in Australia. I have a question for you, Knox, coming back to your question around, your discussion around the paucity of data for a lot of African languages relative to, resources for big languages like English and Spanish, where it's easier to train these larger models. I'm aware, I've seen Timnit Gebru, who is the head of the Distributed AI Research Institute, who's an Eritrean Ethiopian researcher, talk about the success of some projects which are focused on building language models and translation models, working with smaller African languages. For instance, I'm aware of I believe it's Lesan, the startup that's worked with some Ethiopian languages. Yes. So I was wondering if you could speak to what you think the success factors are that in those projects, and how to kind of scale and scale up and spread the approaches that have been used in those projects, and what do you see as some kind of exciting ways forward to try and build on the momentum of those projects?
Thank you so much. As you know, that the African continent has been going on for a while, what they call this AI Indaba, which goes around the continent. So this is where most of these experiences are shared. So in South Africa, we have what we call a research chair or center in these types of thing that is run at University of Pretoria. So as you have rightly pointed out, there are a few projects that are going on that are trying to do this, but from what they are actually doing is that first they have to try and generate large sets of data, both in audio and written form, to try and train these models. And for this past 2 years, I know of a project that has dedicated about 16 countries and 16 languages, from Nigeria to South Africa and in the middle, to provide something like 16,000 hours of audio to train language models. It's a huge endeavor, because then they'll have to take the data and then try to develop models. So this is where we would rightly have come to understand that we have to provide the data first and then build the models from the data, which is again starting a little bit on the backward step to try and do this. And then, of course, we are here talking in open, is then you have to think about when you train these models, are you going to, and most of them are asking their questions with Lepala, are they going to use open AI models? Are they going to share it? Because then it becomes a little bit another thing with indigenous languages, that you will have to get all the permissions if they are working with them to make this data openly accessible. Thank you.
Thank you, Nox. Okay, so I'm going to ask you all a question. I'll give you the mic now in a moment. So, if you remember, in the opening plenary, because we're towards very close to the end, we mentioned, or I mentioned in a question to one of the panelists on the Indigenous, that at the International Data Week in 2018 in Botswana, the CARE principles were formed. So, and now, I mean, FAIR has become, if you like, the acronym, even though you mentioned in your part of the world, it's not always, not everybody knows of it. And then we had the CARE principles, right? So that was 7 years ago. What would you like to see these and the ones who have left and the ones who are not also able to join us this time, but maybe are part of this big, huge International Data Week community, irrespective of how they come together? What would you like to see that we might come and say, this is, in 7 years' time, I'd like to see this? And obviously from your own perspective, thinking of all what you said, AI, we talked about languages, we talked about AI, but we're here also all around data. So what would be nice to see? Are you ready to go? He's ready to go. You start.
I start?
To all of you, yeah.
Okay. My closest statement. Okay. Sovereignty, I think. Being aware of our community of care, of course. And be aware means, in my experience, to integrate both legal aspects and collective aspects that care promotes. And it's a difficult thing to do, because legal matters, constitutional rights, are more individual. They are not collective. And I asked that question on Monday. So in the future, being very optimistic, I might say that identity, sovereignty, respect, and both principles, fair and care, being well known and well practiced.
Thank you.
Yeah. As you said, I just took over. We have been 6 or 7 years into these. I would like to see, like we do usually, a big world map and see more F and see across the country how many are really care compliant and fair, because we have spoken enough about this at conferences like this and workshops this. But I'm also, I deal with a lot of repositories, a lot of the data repositories, the data managers. At the implementation level, there's always a lack of guidance, what exactly they have to do to be compliant with care especially. Fair is, okay, there are tools out there and this thing, because care is so cultural dependent, society dependent, and the variables are so varied, it has become increasingly complicated to really implement this. I think that's what I would like to see, some practical ways of really realizing this. Thank you.
Thanks, Hilary. It's a really good question. I think, and looking back 7 years, what happened? The time flew. Okay, I am worried about changes around the world, about the political discourse and social discourse, and I hope that 7 years in the future we will be here still with a commitment to inclusion and access and so on. So the fundamental care principles and the concepts behind them, that we will still be committed and moving forward on that. And I think past a phase of discussion and seeing results. And I think what you say is exactly right. Like it's complex and it's challenging and it's different in different contexts and countries. And maybe the most useful thing we can do is to share examples where it has worked well, and we can learn from each other's examples, and really to valorize them as things become more fraught. I think good examples are really shining lights for us to follow.
Thanks, Sandra. Knox.
Thank you.
Your wish.
I think for me, of course, my first wish is that I wish to see you all in 2027 in South Africa, where we'll be hosting the International Data Week. However, I think for me, data, I think Rodrigo touched on it, sovereignty. I think I will maybe go back to just a few statistics. In COVID, almost 70% of all the data and outputs were open. We are back at the same before COVID, where 70 to 80% of information on climate is closed. So we haven't really moved to that. We are becoming more closed with research security, becoming more prominent than openness. So I hope that in 7 years we'll be back to a different status quo where we are more open, because without being open and sharing data, we will not solve any global challenges, because individual countries will not solve climate action problems by themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Knox. So I am going to thank our speakers. I think that we are really lucky in this community, the 4 or 3 organizations plus of course our host, but to have such wonderful leaders and people who have given you the example of what they have done in their diverse contexts and countries. But of course I know, and you all know, that many, if not all of you, are doing that too. And we heard now, and I can only reiterate it, that we have a big, important job to do. And it's almost always in times of difficulty like this, where there are challenges with funding and access and things like that, that we need to step up and do the job. So I would like to, on behalf of the esteemed programme committee of International Data Week, present my panellists with their pins. And Knox, even though you're not here, as you have a colleague, I'm going to identify one who will take it back to you. And it's this lovely little pin that you see on me here. Okay, and I thank you all for your attendance and for your interest in the session. And bear with us now while I hand the stage over to the organisers for the closing ceremony. Thank you so much.